Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Presented by Pipe Wrench, and by Junk Be Gone, and by the Garza Law Firm.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into the Sports Source today here in the Junk Be Gone studio. We appreciate you joining us, as always. We're about to kick off our 22nd season of UT football coverage. I'll tell you more about that in just a minute. But as we near the season, I wanted to talk about, one scrimmage in the books now, a couple of weeks of practice, fall camp behind them. What position groups are we feeling better about, maybe? What position groups are we feeling worse about? On Monday on the radio, Bob Hodge and I talked with Will West and Tyler Ivins about Dylan Sampson and how he might be used this year. Apparently that ruffled some folks' feathers, so I went to dig up the numbers. We're going to ruffle the feathers more, so you're going to enjoy that. And we've also got, in a special case, I've been wanting to do this for a while. We always, all the shows talk about officiating, and usually in a bad way. We've got 3 former SEC officials here with us today. So we're going to talk to them a little bit about how officiating's changed, where's the next wave of officials coming from, what's the biggest change for officials, is it the size and speed of athletes, is it the technology? All that coming your way today. Let's get right into it. First segment of this show brought to you by the Garza Law Firm. When you find yourself in need of a lawyer, folks, it can honestly affect every aspect of your life, your job, your family, your relationships with friends, and if serious enough, even your freedom. Take some of that stress away by turning to East Tennessee's most trusted attorney, Marcos Garza, and the team at the Garza Law Firm. They're a huge part of this community, but if you've talked to anybody in town who's ever needed an attorney, you're going to hear the name Marcos Garza, and you're going to hear it in a good light. GarzaLaw.com is where you can go to learn more. We appreciate them for always bringing you the Sports Source here on Sunday mornings. All right, I want to welcome in the first wave of panelists. Like I say, we've got a wave of officials that are going to come in throwing flags a little later. Jimmy Himes right here, Chuck Cavaleris right here, Will West, Bob Hodge. All right, let's start off by talking about where this Tennessee football team is, just kind of a quickie overview. What we're seeing, hearing, reading, wherever you're getting your info from. Are there position groups that you're feeling better about right now than from when it started a couple weeks ago? Are there position groups where you're feeling a little worse? And if you want to go just specific instances with players, I'm fine with that too. I'll throw it up for grabs, and whoever wants to go there can go there.
I'll start out, and I'll say the offensive line. The reason why is 4 of your 5 projected starters at offensive line have dealt with some sort of injury and had to miss at least a practice.
So you're feeling worse about the offensive line?
Feeling worse about the offensive line just because of those injuries. You did have Lance Hurd, who also had to be fitted with a knee brace, and then he was able to get back out there and practice. But you dealt with injuries on that offensive line group last year, and it didn't go well when that happened. Yeah. So if you all have had 4 of 5 that need to start, everybody but Cooper so far has dealt with some sort of an injury and had to miss time, that's a little concerning for me with their depth.
Yeah, and you still don't have a starting left guard, correct? I mean, what I've seen, and you wonder who's going to step forward and take that. So I had that on my list too.
And you don't have depth either.
Right.
Not quality depth. You got body.
Not proven. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, that was on my – if you're going to stay on that you're a little concerned about it, I think obviously the talent is there, guys, but it's secondary. You've got 5 new starters that you've got to work in that can be ready to go and get on the same page. And I think you've got great talent, and I think you kind of nudged some veteran players towards the portal, right? Because you wanted to bring in some.
Got a lot of new guys.
Yeah, but 5 new starters, that can be a tall task.
So are you feeling better or worse about that here into fall camp?
I think it's going to be a work in progress. I think it's going to be okay, but I don't know right away.
Boo Carter getting a lot of talk since you had the injury last week, and we all assumed that everyone would push for him. Josh Heupel gave him some praise the other day after the scrimmage, but Boo Carter's a guy who fans are going to want to see. The problem with anytime you throw a young guy into the secondary, they can make plays. They can also bust. Right. So you might have to deal with a little bit of that. Bob, what do you got for us?
I'm going to go with the running backs.
Yeah.
Because you've got Dylan Sampson hobbled. He's practicing over on the side, and he's got a brace on. According to the reports, Deshaun Bishop had a really good scrimmage yesterday.
Heupel
really
highlighted him, yeah.
Exactly. But where are your three guys? Who are your three guys that you're going to be able to just throw out there, know they're going to be there, know they're going to go? Last year, you had banged up running backs, but you never had a running back that, okay, we don't know where we're going next. So I think running back is a bit of a concern. And I'm still going to stay concerned about DBs. Chuck said they've got great talent. How do we know until they actually play a football game?
Okay,
That
well,
they got great talent. So I'm still concerned about defensive backs, too.
Okay, note, I opened the show by saying, what are you feeling better about? What are you feeling worse about? Has anybody here got anything? Now that the viewers are throwing their remotes at the screen.
Negative Nellies over there. I really like the receiving group. I think they're going to be outstanding. I don't know, and I know Josh Heupel has said they're more talented and deeper at that position than he's had. If they're better than the 2022 group, that's pretty special. When you go back to Hyatt and Tillman and McCoy and that group. Squirrel White's having a great camp. I think Razzle, the Tulane transfer, is really good. Brew McCoy, if he's back healthy 100%, which I think he will be, I like him a lot. Thornton started to come on before he got hurt. I think it's a really good group, and they bring some versatility too. You got the smaller Squirrel Wright, and you got a couple of 6'4", 6'5" receivers. I like that group.
And if you're talking about what you really feel good about, doesn't it have to be the defensive line?
Okay, well, hang on. Let me follow up on the receiver thing. I spoke to somebody this week who said that Brazil fits what they do better than any receiver they've had so far.
Wow.
Think about that. You had a Bolitnikov winner,
Yeah.
and you had Cedric Tillman, who looked really good the year before that. And they said that Brazil was better in terms of a fit for what they do than anyone else.
And plus,
that's somebody who's been over there.
He showed some of that at Tulane, right? I mean, it's not like he's brand new. You've seen some of the things he could do at a pretty good offense.
Okay, now why are you feeling better about the defensive line? Because it's not just what you feel good about. It's what are you feeling better about or worse about since camp started?
Okay, I'm seeing more. I feel like you've got the edge rushers. I feel like you've got that more than just one. I'm seeing more optimism to me about the defensive tackles you can put out there. Then I think that's the meat and potatoes of what you're going to have to do. And you see more and more about what they've done in some of the matchups. The interior defensive line is where I think you're really going to see Tennessee have a little bit more oomph.
Joshua Joseph's to me is a key on that group too.
Did you hear his comments about the defensive line?
Yeah, everybody.
Oh, he was talking about there's nobody that can get past us. And he went through the interior guys, the outside guys.
Yeah.
He said, we got some dogs everywhere. It was, I can imagine Rodney Garner rolling his eyes at it. But anyway, he's confident.
But that kind of thing concerns me because I remember I said this before the season last year that the biggest thing that concerned me about the team was 2 years ago they kept telling me how hard they were working. Last year they kept telling me how great they were as we had it during camp and during SEC Media Days and things like that. So I kind of felt a little bit better about, hey, maybe there's a little humility there again, and we understand it's the work that gets us there, not our talent. And then when I heard that, I was like, oh, that's not ideal,
Well,
right?
see, I'm never a fan of the chatter. But fans love it. Fans, you got to be confident. You got to have swagger. I hated the word swagger when it came. Now it's not even swagger. It's got to have swag.
Yes.
I'd rather you just shut up and play. But they certainly do have the swagger right now. Jimmy, I interrupted you when you mentioned Joseph. Where were you going? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think he's one of the big keys to the defensive line and their production. We know you pretty much know what you're going to get out of James Pierce, right?
Yep.
You need to have another really good pass rush on the other side, and if Joseph can come through, he talked about how he was jealous of Pierce's production last year and all the attention he got. He seems to be more motivated by that. I also wonder if they need to move him from being behind Pierce to the other side.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Because that's my thing. If Pierce is so dominant that everybody in the country is now focused on him, you better have somebody on the other side for when they start doubling up on James Pierce.
Yeah, and I think Joseph has the most ability to fill that role as another edge rusher.
All right.
Last thing.
Very quickly.
Overall team speed makes me feel better of what you read, what you hear.
Bob Hodge with the positive.
Well, we've watched Tennessee for all those years where they just didn't look as athletic as the really good teams on their schedule. Yeah. And then last year they played Virginia. Remember me and you talking during the game going, man, they look faster. Well, some of that was Virginia.
Yeah, turns out a lot of that was Virginia.
I think that it's important that you are an athletic team. I mean, not just that you've got a good player here, a good player there, but overall, and so that is something that's been talked about a little bit, is overall team speed looks a lot better.
All right, very good. I mentioned earlier that we got our 22nd football season coming up. Let me tell you what we're doing this fall. Let's go ahead. We got something new. Saturdays this fall from 11 a.m. to noon. We're going to be leading into ABC College football with the Sports Source Saturday Kickoff. That's an hour-long, fun, fast-paced. It's a Vols preview show. And when I say it's a Vols preview show, look, I know there are people out there going, well, SEC Nation. Hey, man, if you want to watch Tim Tebow break down Arkansas versus Missouri, have at it. We're talking Tennessee on our show. And it will be like no other show in Knoxville sports history. I promise you that. It's going to be bigger, faster, and look different than other shows. Shot on location and in a brand new studio that we are racing to finish right now. All right. So it won't be in this room. However, let me show you who's on this show. It's going to be some of the people you see here and more. Each week, myself, VFL Kevin Simon, VFL Ollie Lane will be co-hosting the thing. Jimmy Himes will be a part. Paige Dower, Bob Hodge, Dave Hooker, Vince Ferrara, Ryan Callahan, Chuck Cavaleris, Tyler Ivins, Josh Ward, Will West, Reese Van Haften, and VFL Mike Stoll. Wow. 15 people will be giving you a score prediction for the Vols game leading right into the noon ABC, which is normally going to be an SEC game. Like nothing you've seen before. Just head over heels Vols coverage from everybody in town that you watch, listen to, and trust. And then on Sundays, like I say, season 22, top post-game show in town is back 90 minutes every Sunday morning with myself, Chuck Cavaleris, Bob Hodge, Jimmy Himes, Josh Ward, and our round of usual VFL suspects, Sterling Hinton, Daniel Hood, Will Overstreet, Mike Stoll, and Marlon Wall. So nothing changes on Sundays. Everything's changing on Saturdays. We appreciate you for going ahead and penciling that in, and we'll see you starting August 31st on that Saturday. Now, when we come back today, we're going to tell you what some national writers had to say about the Volunteers and their schedule. Around here, we're all looking at it saying, oh, it's kind of an easy schedule. Could get you in the playoff. Could that easy schedule backfire? Let's discuss that. Come on back on the Sports Source. This is Heather Dinich of ESPN was writing about teams that could make their first playoff this year, and she says the good things, then she starts talking about the bad things and what could derail Tennessee. I'll kind of skip down there for you. And she wrote, there's not enough on the rest of the schedule to compensate, if Tennessee loses to Oklahoma, there's not enough on the rest of the schedule to compensate for that in the committee meeting room, where wins against ranked opponents are a major focus. Tennessee has a respectable non-conference game against NC State and Charlotte, but wins against Chattanooga, Kent State, and UTEP won't separate the Vols from other contenders, and their other SEC opponents also might not be ranked. Jimmy, around here, the talk this offseason has been, and I think there's legitimacy to it, you got a shot at the playoff because your schedule isn't as difficult as some in the SEC. Okay, so easy schedule, a positive. But could it also leave you with no recourse if you drop one of these Oklahoma, Georgia, Alabama, the three biggies? If you drop one of those, how do you make that up with the rest of that schedule? So easy a blessing or easy a curse?
You don't make it up because the schedule's not difficult enough to find another quality win. Unless I get shocked and Kentucky becomes a 10-win team,
Right.
Okay. But having said that, there are 4 teams on Tennessee's schedule that I think could win 9 games. NC State would be one of them. You got Oklahoma, you got Alabama and Georgia. You better win 2 of them. At 9-3, you're not getting in.
Right.
At 10-2, I think you got a pretty good chance because you'll have at least 2 quality wins. But at 9-3, you're out because the rest of the schedule. And look, Florida's a tough game for Tennessee, right?
Always.
Regardless. But they may be a 500 team. So nationally, you're not getting credit for that.
Yeah.
So I agree with Dinich. I think that if you drop 2 of those 4 games I'm talking about, I don't think you have a chance to get in the college.
Yeah, I mean, John, when I looked at this question, I kind of thought back to the way they used to schedule in college basketball, remember? Where they would schedule like 15 cupcakes almost, and you're 15-0, and boy, that looks good, and then you get into your conference play. Well, what happens if they do the blind resume type approach to this, and you've got even weak FBC teams? They're not even good FBC teams, and somebody else is playing all Power 4 teams, Power 5 teams, whatever you want to call it. That's going to hurt you. I mean, it has to hurt you. There has to be some kind of way to separate those teams.
I don't think it's going to hurt them at all because I think if you're not 10-2 minimum, maybe 11-1, you're not getting in. So if you're not at 3, I don't care who you play, you're not getting in, especially as an SEC team because of how many teams are in the SEC schedules, things like the scheduling, things like that. Missouri has an easier schedule. Ole Miss has an easier schedule. If they're 10-2 and you're not, you're done. So I look at last year. Michigan played nobody out of conference. Michigan had no trouble getting in. Georgia had to lose the Oklahoma game, had an easier schedule. They lose the SEC championship game, but they would have gotten in had they won that. I just think if you do your job, regardless of the schedule, it's going to come down to the eyeball test at the end of the day. And if Tennessee's impressive on the eyeball test and wins enough games, Tennessee's getting in.
What was the old phrase? Dittos? I agree with Will. Now, I think 10-2, Tennessee's in. I just don't think there'd be any doubt. I think at 9-3, Tennessee's out. I just don't think there'd be any doubt. And I don't think the schedule plays that big of a role in it. I really think that if you're 10-2, if you're Tennessee in the SEC, you're in. If you're 9-3, you're out.
I think the schedule could play a role in it if you're 10-2 and somebody else is 10-2.
Right, exactly.
If it's you're 10-2 and you're up against somebody who played somebody better than NC State, Chattanooga, Kent State, and UTEP, I think you could be in trouble in terms of getting in there. But
The other part of that
does
is
come. Go ahead.
NC State's projected to win 9 or 10 games. What if they go 6-6?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sometimes what your opponents do can have an impact
Well,
on.
what if you beat Oklahoma and then they go 5-7?
7-5,
That's right.
yeah.
I mean,
So-
so all that stuff. I mean, I think, once again, you schedule the 3 cupcakes, and if it does hurt you, then maybe somebody ought to go to the baker and quit ordering cupcakes
Yeah, I'm
every
all for-
season.
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the whole point.
But to your
And
point, you
some-
better not lose to Oklahoma, in my opinion.
Yeah, I
Right,
don't
and
think
some
so.
of those teams
I
you
agree with
mentioned
that.
were conference champions undefeated. So you can't really, I don't think you can really compare them as much to 1 or 2 lost teams.
Yeah, I mean-
That's what Tennessee would be up against in this scenario.
Well, in a scenario I would throw out is, let's say Tennessee's 10-2, Oklahoma State's second in the Big 12 at 10-2. Can you make the SEC argument if Oklahoma's 7-5 and let's say NC State's 8-4 and you lost to Georgia and Bama? Can you make but we're in the SEC argument?
Let's bring it a little closer to home. Let's say Tennessee is 10-2 and LSU's 10-2, and LSU beat USC in Las Vegas and
Yeah.
UCLA. They're getting in.
Yeah, they are.
Right.
LSU.
They would have
Right.
played a better non-conference schedule.
Right.
They're in.
Yeah.
So to me, that's where it could come down. But
Exactly.
we'll see. All right. When we come back, like I said earlier in the show, Bob and I took some people off this week on Will and Tyler's radio show. So we'll see. Now we're going to take the numbers, the actual facts that we were just guessing on, and we'll put them out there, and it's really going to tick you off. No, it is interesting stuff. Dylan Sampson as the workhorse back. Is he ready for that role? We'll take a look at the numbers. Come on back. On Monday, Will West and Tyler Ivins, for some reason, have Bob Hodge and I on there, and asked us what we thought about Dylan Sampson and would Josh Heupel use him differently, put him in a little bit different position than he was last year, and we said no, because that's just not what Heupel seems to do. We talked about it on the show last year that why are they running Dylan Sampson the same way they use Jalen Wright? They're 2 different styles of backs. For some reason, that led to people thinking that we hate Dylan Sampson. If anything, it's critiquing the coaching staff for just saying, all our running backs are the same, we use them the same. I disagree with that personally. I think you should maximize guys by calling plays that specifically target their talent. But I wanted to see, was I just talking out of my rear end? So, went and dug deep thanks to Pro Football Focus. Take a look at this comparison. We've got several for you here. This compares Jalen Wright on the left, Dylan Sampson in the center, Jabari Small on the right. First, you've got their offensive grade and where they rank nationally among running backs. Jalen Wright, 11th best. Dylan Sampson, 96th last year. And then Jabari Small, 361. Backfield snaps, you see the ratios there. 303 and then 22 snaps in the slot for Wright, 282 and 13 for Sampson, 213 and 12 for Small. So ratio-wise, Wright got the most carries, but they pretty much used them the same ways. Offensive grade, you see that Jalen Wright was higher than the other guys. Rushing grade, he was higher than the other guys. Blocking grade, pass blocking grade, higher than the other guys. Okay. Yards after contact. This is the average yards after contact. 4.3 yards for Jalen Wright. 3.2 for Dylan Sampson, who's a very elusive guy. 2.5 for Small. Forced missed tackles, more for Jalen Wright. Their elusive rating, which takes into account making guys miss on their own, not necessarily the blocking scheme around them. Jalen Wright, much higher than what Dylan Sampson did last year. Let's flip forward and see specifically how they were used. Again, same 3 backs. There you see zone, how many times they had a zone rush attempt, how many times they used gap scheme on their carries. Ratios are pretty much kind of the same. Again, it's about 2 to 1, 1.5 to 1 for each of those guys. Targets as a receiver, again, Wright was on the field more often, but you see the ratios are pretty much the same. On field for pass snaps, 159 for Wright, 166 for run snaps. I think a lot of people would have thought, well, they use Sampson as a receiver more. Nope. That's not what it shows there. Okay, so let me talk to you just very quickly. This is Football 101. Some of you will just have to snooze through this for a second, but take a look at the next graphic. I have to show you this before I explain the next one. All right, this is A gap. You hear people say A gap, B gap, C gap, D gap. A gap is basically running up the middle. That's between the center and the guards. B gap, between the guard and the tackle. C gap, between the tackle and the tight end. If you got a tight end out there and you run outside the tackle, that's the D gap. All right, so A inside, then B, C, D to outside. So let's see what they did in terms of the players. At the top is their carries. Sampson's in orange since he's back. Now, Wright got more carries, obviously, but look at the ratio. A lot of A-gap runs, fewer B and C gap, more D gap. Dylan Sampson, most A-gap, B and C gap down, up on the D gap. So inside and very wide. But look at the yards per carry of what they did with those runs. Jalen Wright, 9.96 yards per carry in the A-gap. That is 50 carries for 498 yards last year in A-gap runs. And if you're sitting there going, well, Dylan Sampson was the worst of the three in the A-gap run, 5.4, which isn't bad. I mean, I think most people would take 5.4. Yeah. But 9.9, this is what we're talking about. Is Dylan Sampson, and you look through there, the B-gap, Dylan Sampson's better than the other two. C-gap, again, it's Jalen Wright, and Dylan Sampson's down there. D-gap, Sampson's better on the far outside, but not that much better. It's 6.2 to 6.1 yards per carry. I think this just backs up, Bob, what we said on the radio, that they just plug them in and do their thing. They don't change it to specifically target this back's style, and they do have a different style between Sampson and Wright. So my question is Sampson ready to be the workhorse back the way they used Jalen Wright last year?
I think to answer the question, A, is he ready? Yeah, probably. B, will he be successful? Probably not. And that does not translate into hatred for Dylan Sampson. I think the kid's a good running back.
You've been behind him since you first saw him.
I think he'll have a nice NFL career. But I think if I'm the coaches and I'm looking at losing that almost 4 yards per carry going up the middle, and I
almost
can gain
5.
I can gain a little bit. Yeah, almost 5. I think it is on, like you said to open the segment, it's on the coaches to find a better way to integrate him into your offense to where he's most effective. Now, 5.4 yards, okay, pretty dang effective.
Yep.
But you're losing compared to what you had with Jalen Wright, because Jalen Wright is a different kind of back. And I just don't think running backs are interchangeable because they have different styles.
Tells me that Jalen Wright hit the hole like a cannonball.
Yeah.
That's
and he carries people after they jump on the cannonball. He keeps going.
Yeah. Doesn't mean high school sprinter.
Yeah, doesn't mean Dylan Sampson. Maybe he comes out and shows us this year we were wrong. Maybe he goes for 10 yards a carry. But based on what we've seen, I wouldn't expect that. No. I expect a drop-off in terms of that. Using him as the way you use Jalen Wright, I don't think it's going to be as effective.
Nothing against
Dylan Sampson.
To me, the biggest thing, it's not so much about will it work or won't it work. It's a matter of, is that the most effective use of the player, right? And I think that very much like Alvin Kamara under Butch Jones. Butch Jones used Alvin Kamara as an inside runner the same way he did Jalen Hurd. And so
he was good.
And he was good. Yeah. So I think Dylan Sampson is good. The one thing they did do is if you saw slightly fewer pass snaps, Dylan Sampson was on the field, slightly more pass routes that he ran. So there's a slight adjustment they make there, and I do wonder, can they increase that a little bit? But as far as the running game, I just think you declare, are you going to cover the pass? Are you going to defend the run? And we're going to do the opposite at a super fast tempo, and that's what they do.
And here's another way it may change is last year you did more max protect with Joe Milton. Mm-hmm. Maybe if your quarterback is better, your timing is better, he sees the field better, maybe then you get Sampson more into doing what he's better at anyway.
It's hard for me to think of a single back every down in the SEC when you're basically running into the teeth of that defense if you're going to be able to make it the whole season without some kind of injury or missing significant time. Tennessee last year says our 3 running backs 40% of the carries, 40% of the carries, 20% of the carries. I don't know that they really stick to that. But it's really tough with this offense to slam in there. How many times do we say, there was nothing there, there was nothing there?
Yeah.
Well, the running back gets knocked up.
And Jalen Wright made something there.
Right.
The number of times he carried people down the field was ridiculous.
But Sampson doesn't have the kind of power.
Right.
Right.
That we've seen. Yeah.
Yeah, and so with Wright, he didn't even, I don't even think he averaged 12 carries a game, right?
Yeah.
With Sampson, he's not going to be a guy that can carry 18 times a game or 20. He can't. He's not going to do it. He's not as durable. He's not as big. He's not as strong. So they're going to have to use him in different ways. But I'll be curious to see how much they use the backup running back.
Exactly.
Yeah, is it
That's
Deshaun
to
Bishop?
Bob's
When
point.
does Cam Selden get back? How good is he
Well,
going to be?
And one thing that we kind of looked at this week after we had that conversation on Monday, on Tuesday, we kind of did a deeper dive into it. Jalen Wright and Dylan Sampson together carried the ball fewer times than Cody Schrader did for Missouri last year. So
there
they
you go.
didn't use them. They did give them 12 carries, 8 carries. So who are the guys going to get that are going to get 8 and 6 carries while Dylan Sampson gets 12?
That's just it.
Exactly.
Are you going to use it that way, or if
Yeah.
you've just got the one guy this year, does he get more carries?
Yeah.
No. Well, I mean, he's not going to, just can't make it through the season like that.
All right. When we come back, bad predictions, upsets, they happen every year. So let's take a look at the coaches poll. Who are we all wrong about? Because I'm going to show you, they're wrong about somebody in the SEC, usually multiple teams every year. So we'll throw ourselves in with the coaches. Who are we wrong about? Because we all know who's got the easy schedule and the tough schedule. So who are we wrong about? Come on back and we'll tell you. Going to be kind of quick in this segment because I want to get to our officials who've been kindly waiting for us to finish our nonsense. Now is the time of year when we're all certain who's going to be good, who's going to be bad, who's got the easy schedule, who's got the tough schedule. Well, I wanted to see the coaches poll came out this week. So I thought, well, let's look back the last 3 coaches poll and see how they've done just with SEC teams. So let's take a look at the graphics. All right, 2023 on the left. All right, that's last year. That's the preseason at Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Texas A&M. And then the final ranking, Texas A&M wasn't ranked. Missouri wasn't ranked to start the season, and they wound up number 8 in the country. Look at 2022. Oof, bad. They got Alabama and Georgia right, but, they're pets that could get Alabama and Georgia production.
What's it in ours?
Texas A&M, Kentucky, Arkansas, Ole Miss, none of them finished ranked, whereas Tennessee went all the way to 6. LSU, Mississippi State, Carolina were all ranked. 2021, they missed on a couple there. They get the numbers right, but they don't seem to know who the guys are that are going to be filling those numbers. So my question to you guys, well, let's take a look. 2024 poll. Let's flip to the next one. Here's what they came out with this week. They're the SEC teams, and I put NC State in there as well just so you'll see where Tennessee's other ranked opponent is. You got Georgia at 1, you got Alabama at 5, Tennessee is 15th, Oklahoma 16, NC State 22. You see the rest of the SEC's guys in there. All right, so quick answers here. We got about 3 minutes, so keep that in mind. Quick answers. Who are we wrong about?
Ole Miss and Oklahoma are too high. A&M is too low. A&M is a loaded roster and a pretty easy schedule. Ole Miss is going to lose, I think, 2 games. That game to Georgia and LSU, and then Oklahoma again. You don't have an offensive line.
Who are we wrong
Missouri. Missouri's rated too high. They've lost Cody Schrader, who's a great running back, and they also lost their defensive coordinator.
I think everybody's also going to be looking for them. I think Tennessee got a little dose of that last year.
Yep.
So I think they are going to be set up to be this year's Tennessee, where they take a little bit.
Right.
Doesn't mean they're going to be bad. Just
But
means they're going to take a little step back.
It's the easiest schedule probably in the league. Is the one
true.
thing they have in their favor. I look at LSU.
If we're
and
right about everything else.
Yeah, we're
Go
right.
ahead.
I look at LSU. You're replacing a Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback. You had 2 receivers, first round draft choices in the NFL. Your secondary has been terrible. You brought in a new defensive coordinator. Brian Kelly's going to throw his players under the bus. I just don't see them finishing.
They have great talent in the secondary, though.
Yeah, they have great talent. Yeah.
I'm gonna go with you've got Missouri ranked a little bit too high. Ole Miss, I just kind of hope you have them ranked too high. But I'm gonna go with, on that list, I thought Missouri was the one that looked like they were probably a little too high based on what they lost from last year's team.
Yeah, can I throw out Auburn?
I was gonna
Finish this
say- I
season
was-
in the top 25.
I was going to say, that was
Yes.
my next question. The coaches always miss one who climbs in there, at least one. I was going to say, is it Auburn?
It's
That's
Auburn.
who I
Yeah,
was
they're
gonna
in the
go
blue
with.
chip
If they can
ratio.
find a quarterback.
Yeah, they were toe-to-toe with Georgia and Alabama
Yeah,
last year.
I think Auburn is the one that's going to wind
I
up
agree with
ranked.
that. Yep.
Okay. All right. Very good. So there, we already. Now we can't
know
say
what?
we're wrong about it because we're right about it.
See how
Also,
smart we
I
is?
also wouldn't sleep on Florida potentially getting into the lower part of the top 25.
toughest
Just
schedule in
simply because
America.
they got
though.
talent.
They do have talent.
They got talent, and maybe something happens and they end up winning.
Yeah, maybe some of
8 games.
those tough teams on their schedule aren't as tough as
Yeah.
we think going in. Okay. All right, I have been wanting to do this. We started this show in 2003, and I've always wanted to do a show where we brought on officials because Lord knows you guys get talked about a lot on talk shows, and we don't hear a lot of you. So I wanted to get a group of officials with us, and what we have is former SEC official Gerald Hodges right here, Bert Ackerman, former Tennessee football player and former SEC official right here. Right there, Eddie Powers, former Tennessee football player, former SEC official, former NFL official. Guys, I appreciate you being with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
I want to start, but everybody always looks inward or looks at the officials. I want to hear what you guys say. Let's turn the cameras around and hear your take on some things. And the first deal is, what has changed the most from when you guys started decades ago? You're all retired at this point. From when you started decades ago to when you watch a game now, and from when you retired, what was the biggest change? Was it the fact that the players got bigger, stronger, faster? Or was it all the technology around you that changed how you call a game and how officials call a game?
It's a little of all of them.
Chuck, he's cavaliersing the question, right? We're good there.
There you go. He's right. He's right. That's it. Because
First thing I noticed, obviously, going from small college to the SEC is the size and speed, and it's still to this day that's a big factor.
Makes it harder for you guys as officials, the faster and bigger they got?
Well, yeah, but every time they did that, they enlarged how many officials we had. I think I got in the league, there was 6. Now there's 8?
8.
So I did work with mostly 7 when Gerald and I worked on the same crew together. And
when I got in, we had 4 in non-SEC.
Wow. Yeah.
And then we had 5 when it was SEC versus SEC.
In terms of all that technology, has it all been I mean, that's the players have changed it, but in terms of the technology, it seems to me that there are a lot. Now they tell you, all right, don't whistle this dead because we can go catch it in replay if it's a fumble. You have some guys, it seems like they're trying to decide what's the reaction going to be in here if I make this call. How much has the eye in the sky impacted what officials today are going through, or has it?
I finished up my last 17 years in the replay booth, but I had 1 year on the field with replay, and there's a little bit of that, but when you're out there on the field and you see, you call what you see. You don't worry about the replay. Granted, the only caveat to that is on a fumble or a pass fumble. So
it's not created any hesitation in knowing that somebody else is going to come in behind you.
No.
And I think you'll find that 98.9% of the time the call on the field's correct.
All right, well, tell me this. You've got fewer guys going into it. I've got friends who referee high school games. They say it's harder to find guys. I've had people tell me we may be playing Saturday high school games because you don't have enough crews to crew all the games on Friday, and guys will have to work both weekends. That's how bad it's getting in terms of finding people to do it. Why is it that it's becoming harder and harder to find officials? If there's not a drawback on the field, it's not the technology. I'm tired of being overruled. If it's not, the players are just too big and too fast to get. What is it that's changed that has created kind of a gap there in terms of creating future officials?
Well, there's several things. One is the source of future officials has changed because when I was a player in the early 60s, 1 or 2 players would move to the pros. All the rest were through when they finished their career. Today, the whole senior class and 2 or 3 lower class go to the pros. They may not be active on a pro team, but they're on the taxi squad. So former college players aren't available until 5 to 7 years after they finish playing. Well, by that time, they're married, they got young kids, and they've had a nice life. And going down to start with Pee Wee League football to learn officiating is not attractive to them.
Well, and I would think that somebody who's played any level of pro ball for any amount of time, coming back and deciding I'll go into officiating now, they make so much money now compared to, there was a time when the pro players had to have second jobs. Now, you go and play a couple of years in the NFL, you're not going to come back and work for $50 at a Pee Wee game.
Nobody officiates for the money.
That's right.
Every bit of it is contributing to the game. So it's not an influence really in people's decision making, or if it is, they shouldn't be officiating.
Yeah, well, I've been told there are one of the things that's a drawback is a lot of these kids they're trying to get into the lower levels. The response has been, I get too much guff on social media from parents and fans when I make the bad call. That has changed. And also, it's not worth enough, if there's not enough money to make it worth me putting up with that, is what I'm hearing from a couple of high school refs who tell me that's what they're
true
hearing.
Because the fans' impact on the game has increased tremendously. There's not much respect for officials in the general fandom.
And/or coaches. High school coaches are leaving the ranks, but faster than the officials, and for the very same reason.
Eddie, thoughts?
I think it's, everything's gotten bigger, stronger, faster. Like you said at first, it was just what's going on. And some of these guys just, think they know it all. Then they might come the first meeting and go, I don't know a lot of it. This is horrible. I don't know this much football, and don't ever come back. It's not just coming out there and throwing the ball out and blowing a whistle. It's a lot more to that than what they expect.
And when you explain to them that in the beginning you're going to be doing Pee Wee League ball, and after 2 or 3 years you might move up to junior high ball, their eyes glaze over and they say, that's not what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And they're not willing to put the effort in. They don't realize that they have to learn officiating just like they had to learn as a player. You start at the bottom rung and work your way up.
Yeah.
And it's a major impediment when you take that official that said, well, I'm a future official, he said, I'm kind of interested in that, and you take them out to their first Pee Wee League ball game, that's the last time you see of them.
Yeah. Exactly. That, and my friends, that's exactly what they said, that these guys will say, okay, we'll see you next week, and then they don't answer their phones. They're done.
It's a little bit harder than what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. That and the fact that, there's the famous story of the basketball official who made Kentucky fans felt he made a bad call. He had a roofing business in Kansas City or something, and the Kentucky fans tracked him down online, and they went and they gave his business all kinds of bad grades to try and hurt the man's business and life. And if I'm looking at it, do I want to put up with that? I don't know that I want to deal with that. Of course, I'd also look at it, if I'm a coach and I'm the head coach getting paid millions, okay. But I don't know if I'd want to put up with the coaching side either. The social media and the fact that the fans can now reach out and grab you and hurt your business, that would impact my decision-making in terms of whether or not I go into officiating or not.
Sure. Social media is probably one of the major detriments to getting and keeping young officials. That's right. It really is.
All right. Very good. When we come back, we're going to give Jimmy Hines a crack at these guys. Everybody, we're going to rotate through some of our fellas. Everybody gets a chance to throw out some of the questions. We're talking kind of big picture. We may go into more specifics about rule changes that might impact Tennessee. Perhaps diving might come up at some point. We'll talk about all that. Come on back on the Sports Source. Back with Eddie Powers, Bert Ackerman, Gerald Hodges, all these gentlemen are former SEC officials. And right there, Jimmy Hines. So, Jimmy, I'll let you fire out your question.
Guys, I want to ask you about this. With the up-tempo offenses, we've seen more fake injuries, flopping, diving, whatever you want to call it. And I understand that officials have difficulty in determining whether there's an injury. But what I don't get is when you see a coach signal for a player to go down when he's coming off the field, he fakes the injury, and I'm an opposing coach. I turn it into the SEC office, and the SEC does nothing about it. Why? And by the way, Steve Shaw, the national coordinator official, said that this attacks the integrity of the game to see these fake injuries. So why is nothing done about it when you have proof?
That'd be a good question for the conference administrators, for one. But the other thing you've got to remember is the College Football Rules Committee is made up about 90% coaches and athletic directors. They brought that up the last 4 or 5 years in a row for their rule changes. It never gets out of committee. So
They don't want to change it.
Yeah.
Why not?
Because of the advantage that it gives them. That's the reason they do it, but they can't prove it. You can't prove it on the spot. If somebody's hurt, not hurt type of thing, and or even if they give signals, but they can all give different signals or whatever, and you can't really prove it. I don't think in while the game is going on type thing.
But after the fact, you can.
Probably.
Even though they're giving that signal on the sideline, that doesn't mean the player isn't injured on the field. It'll be a small fraction of the time that he might be injured and they gave the signal.
Right.
But you've got a liability there if you don't respect that. What would solve the problem is when a player is given an injury timeout, he must leave the game for 10 plays or until the next change of possession. Players don't want to give up playing time, and they will rebel against the coach trying to get them to fake an injury.
Yeah.
They'll ignore it. So, and that's the way you solve it, is by getting the rules straightened out to where there's a penalty to the player if he fakes an injury.
The other thing, too, is that Bert mentioned the legal aspects of officiating. Every Division I, probably 2, 3 official has a liability policy for their officiating, well over $1 million. If we don't stop the game and it turns out the player was hurt, we're not there. And Doc Punch was famous for that. We're not there to determine whether they're injured or not.
But that's not what I'm talking about, though.
Oh,
I understand that.
yeah.
I appreciate that. I'm saying when there's proof and it's turned into John McDade, the SEC supervisor official, nothing is done about it.
I just wonder if their
I don't
answer
get
that the coaches really don't want it changed. I mean, think about it.
And see, John McDade has no control over the coaches or the rules. It's got to come, like Bert said, there's got to be a rule in place that penalizes that behavior.
Because when you think about it, I mean, Tennessee, Josh Heupel would be the perfect person to hate this because people use it against his offense.
Yeah.
However, who gives his offense and his defense a breather, gives his defense a breather after every touchdown by somebody, hurting themselves on an extra point? That's Josh Heupel. So I guess I guess the coaches do view it as another bullet in the gun. I've got that in my hip pocket. If you take it away, that's a bit of gamesmanship I won't have.
I've had 2 SEC coaches tell me off the record, I will continue to fake injuries until they do something about it.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think all of them will.
Yeah.
There's no incentive not to.
And see, the odd thing, after a touchdown, you're going to get a 3-minute TV commercial.
Anyway, yeah.
Anyway.
And Tennessee gets a 6-minute.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you got 3 minutes for it.
But the injury, yeah.
Oh, it's remarkable. Clock, it's a heck of a performance. They've got it down. They know how long
Well,
he's
Eddie
down.
might help you with that.
Yeah,
Eddie's
I
a
was
red
just saying,
hat.
they come to me and go, are you going to have a TV timeout? And I go, I don't know yet. We haven't kicked the extra point. And now I know, and now after a couple of years, I know why they asked me, because they take it back to the head coach and whatever they discuss. But I'm just shut mouth either way. I don't, it's none of my business, it's none of my jurisdiction. So, I have to wait for the headset to come on and say we'd like to have one of our commercials after the extra point.
Was it frustrating for you on the field when you would see somebody dive
absolutely.
like that?
Absolutely.
I mean, there's nothing you do
have
about
an idea,
but you're frustrated. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're not oblivious to it by any means, but it's very frustrating.
Makes the game longer.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny. They say they want to speed it up so they can just basically they speed it up and then they allow that happen.
Yeah.
The reality is they like it being long so they can get commercials in there. All right, Jimmy, thank you very much. When we come back, we're going to turn the questionnaires podium over to Bob Hodge. We'll see what he wants to ask these guys. When we come back on the Sports Source, we'll continue talking about officiating, big picture, state of officiating, etc. Come on back. Back with our former SEC officials and Bob Hodge. Bob, I'm going to give you the mic. Let you do the questioning in this round.
All right. Guys, one of the things, I love the rules of football and how a team can tweak them and everything. From an officiating standpoint, though, I'm not going to talk about anything specific, but every year rules get changed.
Correct.
And when you're a veteran official, you've been doing it a long time, and you've made this call this way, be it some kind of motion change or what is holding, what is this, what is that. How does that affect you guys? Is sometimes the rule book just moving too fast?
Well, not necessarily that so much, but once you get a basic knowledge, there are rule changes every year. There are fewer this year. I've been fortunate to sit in on some of the rule Zoom calls with technology, but this has been the fewest. But you get a basic knowledge, and then basically you study those year round now, but especially when the new rule books come out, you study the changes. Okay, this is different than what I know. And then you go through that thing. But once you get a knowledge built up, you still review them all.
Right.
But you work on the changes every year when they come out. And I think that.
And the specific changes in the rules is one thing, but it's also the interpretation of it. And once the rule is changed, there's a lot of documentation that goes into helping officials try to figure out what are the applications of that rule and when are you going to call it, when are you not going to call it.
Yeah.
And we go through spring practice. We work the game scrimmages in spring practice, and that's where you test it out. And there'll be a publication after spring practice of adjusting the interpretation of the rule changes so that you've got those things weeded out. You can't make them in real time out on the field. They've got to be studied and straightened out.
See, I'm like Bob a little bit. I think I would be, oh, wait, that was last year's rule.
Yeah.
That's never happened.
I think the nice change about it is it takes care of injuries. I mean, if you do something and it injures the player, you know, way back when, before I started playing college football, you couldn't block you couldn't block in the back. But before that, you could block in the back, as long as you're above the waist. And so that, just a lot of injury penalties, that prevents everybody from getting hurt.
Well, what about also, Sunday rolls around, everybody's complaining about the way Tennessee's game was officiated. If they lost, oddly enough, when they win, you guys always seem to do
pretty
You
good.
did a great job, yeah.
But come Sunday and you guys go into the review process, honestly, what would be the percentage that you're watching a game and of all the calls that you have to make, not just including penalties, but all the stuff you have to get right? Are you 98% right, 99?
It better be in the high 90s or you won't be there. I mean, it's just that. That's a fact. Yeah.
So there's not a whole lot of sitting in there going, well, you missed this 4 times in a row. That's
When I worked for the NFL, it was 98.6% correct.
98.6?
Yeah. I remember that from my rookie year.
And the 1.4 was always against the Minnesota Vikings. I understand that. Well, can I?
Oh, they NFL?
Oh, man. I have time for
go ahead. I was going
one more quick question.
Yeah.
And this is kind of an NFL thing, but just wondering. People always say full-time officials in the NFL would make it better officiating. Do you guys think is that true?
I'm going to let Eddie answer. My personal opinion is no.
And this is just overall. Would it make officiating better at all?
I don't think so, because what are you going to do Tuesday through Friday or Saturday?
And 9 months out of the year, you don't have a game.
You'd be. I don't know. I don't think it'll.
It wouldn't make a difference.
I don't think it ever
It's the
happened.
quality of the incoming officials is what determines whether you have good officiating or not.
And their supervisors that can coach you up. Can take,
The NBA has permanent full-time officials, and that doesn't stop fans from screaming about every travel call that gets made or not made.
Hockey and baseball.
Yeah.
But they have regular games through the week, and so full-time officiating is necessary,
That
really,
makes
to be able
sense.
to
Good
do
point.
it. College ball is once a week, and what do you do in the other part of the time? And
Let me throw out something that you hear all the time, okay? That we all say it, we all talk about it, but if you're 98.6% correct, that tells me that the old adage isn't true, and that is, well, you could call holding on every play.
Well, you could.
Okay, well then
But
so that means anytime you call it would be correct.
No.
Okay. You know what I'm getting at, though. If it's 98.6,
Well, they don't want you to call holding away from
every
the play.
time. Yeah.
It's got to be part of the play.
Point of attack.
Well, and then you hear every year at all levels of football, they're going to emphasize something this year. This is a point of emphasis this year.
Right.
Do you guys have any input in on that, or do they just tell you, no,
They
you're
do.
going to call?
Well, at the college level, they would send the survey out. I hadn't seen them in the last year or two, but they would send the survey out, and we're looking at changing this. What do you think about it?
Yeah.
Sometimes they just trash it and do what they're going to do anyway.
Okay.
And the NFL has a committee that does that, a committee of officials that does that. They can hear it from the outside, but then they present it to the committee of seasoned officials. Go ahead, Bert.
it takes 2 or 3 years for something to filter up and finally get into being a rule change. It's not something that's done once and it's decided unless it's a really catastrophic situation.
I didn't know that. I thought things kind of change quick sometimes.
No.
All right, very good. All right, when we come back, we'll get Chuck Cavaleris. He's a serial referee blamer when Tennessee loses. We'll let him get his shot at these guys. Come on back on the Sports Source. Back with Eddie Powers, Bert Ackerman, Gerald Hodges. These are all former SEC officials. We appreciate them being here today. And last but not least, we got Chuck Cavaleris. This is the last segment, so the questions have to be good, Chuck.
Got to bring it, baby. Hey, one of the big changes this year, guys, is the on-field communication among players, right? Each team can have 18 iPad tablets spread among assistant coaches, players, whoever. A head coach can have headset to helmet communication with one player until the play clock hits 15 seconds, correct?
Correct.
With this going, the tablet seems like it's just going to make it that much more tougher for people to say, hey, he missed this, or you missed this holding, or you did that. My question is the communication as good as it could be between the officiating crews? With so many changes on the field for coaches and players, can you guys, with crowd noise and everything else, do you think the officials can communicate with each other as well as they could?
Well, yes, now because they have what they call an O2O, an official to official. All 8 officials on the field have a headset and a mic. They can talk to each other. But you were mentioning the tablets. The other part of the rule change, if a coach takes a tablet up to an official and says, hey, look at this, 15-yard unsportsmanlike penalty.
Oh, okay.
So that happened at the bowl game last year, and they agreed to have the tablets, but that was the caveat.
That's
to
awesome.
that.
Thoughts? Anything to add to that?
I like it because I like the way Gerald said, because it doesn't slow the game down. You know, we don't want to slow the game down just because of that.
It helps a lot on penalty enforcement. Eddie and I both work downfield. You're chasing receivers.
Yeah.
If the guy's got a pass interference way downfield, the referee's 50 yards
Exactly.
upfield, he doesn't have to run all the way up there and get right in his ear and tell him,
Yeah.
hey, I've got pass interference. He just gets on the mic, or his mic, and tells him what you got, the number, walk over, administer it, and they go on.
And we know the official is not supposed to work a game from where they graduated. Rocky Good taught me that years ago. Is there any places when you get your assignments, you're saying, oh, we got to go back there, or that crowd's the worst we have to deal with?
And since you're retired, you can all say this now.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think the rule is the team you played with or the town you live in. Okay?
Yeah,
so
or
say
with
I,
or
I
had.
can't do Tennessee games because I played here, but also if I didn't play at Tennessee and say I played at Auburn, but I live in Knoxville, I can't do Tennessee games. And that's
If you
protection.
played with or for a head coach. And
Yeah, with or for a head coach.
yeah.
Were there any places, though, inside the
Yeah.
SEC that were worse than others in terms of unofficials?
If
Or maybe
you,
you're like, oh, man, I don't want to go
if
back.
you worry, if you worry about crowds, you're in the wrong place.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's immaterial to you.
But
Exactly.
Gerald and I like to fish, so we kind of went down a day or two early and did some fishing, but other than that, we were okay.
Well, let me ask you this. What, let's say they give you the opportunity to change something about modern officiating. It could be a rule. It could be the way something's handled overall. What do you think needs to be changed from the official's point of view?
The fake injury on the field is by
Yeah,
far
that would be, I
It's
think
number one.
everybody
Yeah,
would,
what's the answer?
yeah.
You know, we don't have a.
penalize the
closest thing-
player. He
yeah.
has to leave the field.
Yeah, 5 plays or 6 plays or something to where you're just off the field and stuck.
But if he's
right.
hurt, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Anything else that you would change, you would tweak?
I'd go right back the way it is, other than actually talking about the injury thing. But no,
You know, they're doing the kickoff stuff a little bit different now, so and
It'll only be a matter of time before that trickles to the college game since they're doing it.
and it's like, you know, they're trying to prevent injuries, and then they go in, and that's going. I don't know what it's going to do.
How hard, that's basically starting from scratch. I mean, Bob kind of touched on new rules coming in, but that's almost like creating a whole new play out of it. How difficult is that to get something that's brand new down? That's not like, oh, now this is no longer a 10-yard penalty, it's a 5-yard penalty this year. That's one thing. This is a whole other setup and learning how to watch that thing develop, because even as a fan looking at it in this first weekend of NFL action, it's taking some getting used to. I'm like, oh yeah, they can't do this or they can do that.
Yeah.
Is that difficult on an official?
Well,
No,
it is to
because
me.
you've
It is to me. I was in when I came in. You could block below the waist on a kick, and then I played that way too.
Right.
And so then it was, you know, okay. Then the next thing I know, the next year it changed. You can't block below the waist. Go ahead, Bert.
But not for you.
Well, you've got spring practice games, simulated games that you work, and so after working 4 or 5 of those with the new rules changes, then you feed back into the commissioner about what your reaction to the rule changes are, and you get some adjustments to that. But by the time the season starts, you've had 5 or 6 spring games and 3 or 4 preseason scrimmages. You've wrung out the rules changes completely by that time.
and on your kickoffs too, keep in mind each official on the field has a certain responsibility for a certain part of that field. So you're not
Haven't learned it all.
Yeah,
Just your zone.
You need to know what's legal in your area.
Gerald Hodges, Bert Ackerman, Eddie Powers, thanks to all of you for coming and doing this. I appreciate it. Been wanting to do this for a while. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. When we come back, we will be talking one last big question. And I'm taking Nico Iamaleava and Josh Heupel off the table. Who's the most important person, the most important character in Tennessee having success in 2024? Could be a coach, could be a player. Who's the top person, not named Nico, not named Heupel? Come on back on the Sports Source. All right. The quarterback and the head coach are off the table because those are the easiest answers, and I don't like giving you guys the opportunity to have easy answers. So, who's the most important figure when it comes to Tennessee having a successful 2024, not named Nico Iamaleava and Josh Heupel? And I just throw it out so whoever wants it can take it.
I'll say it's Cooper Mays, because I saw what it was when Cooper Mays wasn't there, and that was not pretty. And I think that they're even maybe in a worse spot this year. Tennessee is on the offensive line when it comes to depth than they were last year. So I think Cooper Mays is that valuable to this team this season.
I mean, I think a good one. The obvious to me is James Pierce. I mean, he's gotten so much hype in what he brings to the defense and in terms of being able to help the secondary by getting to the quarterback, having to account for an extra for him like John talked about. I had him in my top three for sure.
You know, it's funny. I thought about that. You make a good case, the fact that it does help cover your secondary if it's not all it's cracked up to. Well, it's not cracked up to be much, but if it doesn't hit that level,
they have great talent.
Yeah, you're going to hear that. You're going to need the pass rush to get there and protect it a little bit. I was going to say that he's a normal pick, but natural pick because of all the hype around him. But it's a pass rusher. It's a single pass rusher. Is that someone who's going to be able to impact win after win, game after game, like say Cooper Mays, who's in there for every snap on offense? But still, you make a good point, Chuck. You almost had me going over.
How about Tim Banks? For this reason, you assume that Tennessee's offense is going to be pretty good. Can your defense step up and be better than it's been? With all that talent in the defensive backfield, I think they probably obviously are. But, so why not just go and will they get a little better?
That's good. We discussed this last week. Will and I are on the other side. We went through the numbers, and it wasn't the offense it wasn't the defense last year that hurt them. The defense played at a top 25 level. It was the offense.
That's the big assumption.
But everybody focuses on the defense. So I think most people agree with Bob here that Tim Banks is a good one. Jimmy?
I'm going to give you a little different one, and that's Keenan Peely, the linebacker.
I just wrote him down.
And it's not because I think he's a great player. I think he can be, but he calls the defensive signals. Who's his backup?
Yeah.
So my concern is how big of a drop-off is there when he's not out there?
And we've only seen
30
Cooper
plays of him.
30 snaps.
But we've only seen 30 plays of him to begin with.
Right.
Yeah.
But when they talk about him, he was a captain right off the bat. He's a leader. He's 26 years old or whatever.
Right.
He's got two grandkids.
I've got one more good one.
Okay.
Brew McCoy. And I'll tell you why. To me, he is the inspirational leader of this football team. He's your most physical player on this football team. And to get him back, and I don't think it has to be for week one, but to get him back and to get him out there contributing, blocking, catching passes, I think that is such a lift emotionally for this whole team.
All right, wow, Chuck. Leader of the Brew McCoy fan club. Good job to all of you. I appreciate it. I'll duck the question. I'll bring it to you next week. You have to tune in live next week. We'll see you then. Thanks to those officials for being here. Thanks to you. We're thinking of our director, Chris Lane, today. Family issues. God bless you, Chris. We're with you, buddy.